Vivian Jose Mensa was 38 years old when she walked out of the Fulton County Courthouse with a garbage bag of clothes, her daughter's backpack, $41 in her checking account, and a divorce decree that gave her none of the house, none of the savings, none of the restaurant her hands had built from nothing. The lawyer she had used was the one she could afford, which was barely one at all. Her ex-husband, Marcus, had spent 4 years systematically moving money into accounts she could not see and businesses she had never heard of. And the judge had looked at the documentation and made his ruling. And that was the end of it. She stood on the courthouse steps in the November cold with the garbage bag at her feet, and her daughter Amara, who was 7, holding her hand and looking up at her and waiting to see what her mother's face was going to do. Vivian kept her face still. She had learned this from her own mother, that the face you give a child in a hard moment is the thing they carry. She looked down at Amara and said, "We're going to be fine. I promise you, we are going to be fine." What she had was $41, a garbage bag, and the recipe for jollof rice that her grandmother had taught her at 8 years old in a kitchen in Accra that smelled like charcoal and bay leaf, and the particular sweetness of overripe tomatoes going into a pot. What Marcus did not know, what he had never thought to consider, because a man who spends 4 years carefully taking does not think about what he has not bothered to take, was that the only thing Vivian Jose Mensa had ever needed to build something real was a pot and a fire, and the knowledge in her hands. It had no idea, not until the night 2.5 years later, when he turned on the television and saw her face. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you absolutely need to hear. The alarm went off at 5 a.m. on the morning it all started, which was a Saturday in February, 3 weeks after the divorce. Vivian was sleeping on a pull-out sofa in her cousin Delia's apartment in Decatur, Georgia, a 2-bedroom apartment that Delia shared with her teenage son, which now also contained Vivian and Amara in the living room, Amara in the sofa single permanent cushion, and Vivian on the pull-out frame with a sleeping bag she had borrowed from Delia's son. She had been in Delia's living room for 19 days. She had been looking for a job for 18 of them. She got up without using the alarm a second time. She moved quietly through the dark apartment to the bathroom, showered in 4 minutes, dressed in the clothes she had laid out the night before. She had 13 presentable outfits, the ones she had grabbed first from the garbage bag before everything else. She rotated them on a fixed schedule. She had written on a notepad so she never had to think about it in the morning. Thinking in the morning was for things that mattered. The clothes were not the thing that mattered. She made coffee in the small kitchen and stood at the counter and looked out the window at the parking lot below, which was still dark, the sodium lights orange and low. She was a precise woman. She had been precise her entire life. It was not a temperament she had cultivated so much as a survival strategy she had inherited from the circumstances of a life that had rarely given her the luxury of imprecision. She had grown up in Stone Mountain, the eldest daughter of Ghanaian immigrants, her father a maintenance worker, her mother a home care aide. And she had cooked for 4 younger siblings from the time she was 10, because someone had to, and she was the oldest. And it turned out she was also the most gifted. She cooked the way people who understand food cook, not from recipes, but from understanding, from a knowledge of what heat does to protein and what acid does to fat and what thyme does to onion. A knowledge she had absorbed in her grandmother's kitchen in Accra on a summer visit at 8 that had rerouted whatever she had been before into whatever she became after. She had gone to culinary school at 22 on a combination of loans and a scholarship from a foundation for first-generation students. She had graduated at the top of her cohort. She had spent 5 years in restaurant kitchens in Atlanta, starting at prep, moving to line, reaching Sal's chef by 28 at a restaurant in Midtown called Canopy that had 2 James Beard semifinalist nominations in the years she was there. She had run the Sauté station 6 nights a week. She had broken down the station at midnight and rebuilt it at 4 p.m. the next day, and had done this for 3 years without missing a service. The chef she worked under was a difficult man who did not praise easily, and who had told her, at the end of her 2nd year, that she was the best line cook he had employed in 15 years, and that he meant it as a simple statement of fact. She had taken it as one. She was not a woman who needed to be told things she already knew, but she was a woman who appreciated it when the telling was honest. She had met Marcus at a food industry event when she was 29. He was in real estate development, It was handsome and persuasive, and he asked her 3 questions about her work with the focused attention of a man who wanted to understand something, and she had been, by the end of the evening, charmed. The questions, she understood much later, had not been curiosity. They had been reconnaissance. The difference looked the same from the outside, but felt different from the inside, and she had not yet developed a particular reading of him that would have told her which one she was looking at. That reading would come. It always did. It came 4 years into the marriage, gradually at first, and then all at once, the way structural failures tend to come. She had been wrong about the focused attention. It had not been curiosity. It had been the assessment of a man who was always calculating what a thing was worth and what it could be used for. She understood this fully only in retrospect, the way you understand the load-bearing function of a wall only after it has been removed and the ceiling begins to shift. By the time she understood it, she had been married for 7 years, had co-signed his business loans 4 times, had left the restaurant where she was sous chef to open a restaurant of their own with his capital and her food, and had spent 4 years building something that was genuinely excellent while he spent 4 years moving their shared money to places she could not follow. The restaurant was called Ace. It seated 68. She had designed the menu herself. Contemporary West African, the kind of food that took her grandmother's knowledge and her culinary training and put them in conversation with each other. The food press had come. The food press had been kind. The restaurant had been full on weekend nights within the first 3 months. She had built a staff of 14 people, most of whom she had trained herself, and a kitchen that ran on the principles she had learned at Canopy: precision, consistency, pride of execution, nothing going to the table that was not right. The restaurant was the best thing she had made in her professional life. It was also, as it turned out, the largest thing Marcus had ever taken from someone. The divorce proceedings had taken 14 months. He had filed first. His attorney was a man from a large firm who knew the specific mechanics of asset concealment in ways that the general practice attorney Vivian could afford, did not. Marcus had spent the preceding 2 years transferring the restaurant's profits into a management company he alone controlled, depreciating the equipment, restructuring the lease, and creating a paper version of the business that bore no useful resemblance to the actual business Vivian ran every day. The judge had looked at the paper and made a ruling consistent with it. That was how it ended. She did not think about this on the Saturday morning in Delia's kitchen. She drank her coffee and looked at the parking lot and thought about the $300. The $300 was what she had left after 3 weeks of job applications had produced exactly 2 callbacks, neither of which had led to anything. And after she had paid Delia $200 toward the groceries for the month and bought Amara new shoes because Amara had grown out of her old ones without anyone noticing. She had $300, and she had her knowledge, and she had a notepad on which she had been writing every night after Amara went to sleep for 3 weeks. The notepad contained a business plan. It was not called a business plan on the notepad. She had written ideas at the top of the first page in her careful cursive, but it was a business plan. It listed the menu she would cook if she were cooking for herself: jollof rice in 3 variations, the kelewel she had learned from her grandmother, the chicken stew that had been her mother's contribution to her culinary education, the pepper soup she had taught herself from a phone call to an aunt in Lagos, the chin-chin she could make in quantity with her eyes closed. It listed the equipment she would need. It listed the locations. It listed the permit requirements she had looked up on the city's website at midnight on her phone. It listed what she could do with $300. The answer was not much, but not nothing. She called Delia's name at 6 a.m. and asked if she could borrow the car. The first Saturday, she drove to a church parking lot in Decatur, where she knew a morning flea market ran on weekends. She had emailed the organizer 3 days earlier and explained that she was a professional chef who wanted to sell food and asked what the vendor fee was. The vendor fee was $35 for a 6-foot table. She paid it from the $300 without hesitation, because hesitation was how you lost the $35 and stayed home. She drove to the restaurant depot on the other side of the county with the remaining $265 and bought rice, tomatoes, onions, peppers, chicken, plantains, palm oil. On the 17 spices she needed in the quantities she could afford. She bought foil trays and leads and napkins and plastic forks. She bought nothing she did not need, and she needed everything she bought. She drove back to Delia's apartment and cooked from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Delia's kitchen was a standard apartment kitchen. One decent burner, one mediocre, one limited counter space, and she worked within its constraints the way she had always worked within constraints, which was by thinking 2 steps ahead and never blaming the kitchen for the food. The jollof went on the good burner in Delia's largest pot, which was not large enough but was sufficient. The kelewele went in batches in the cast iron pan she had carried from the courthouse steps in the garbage bag because the cast iron pan was the one kitchen item she would have taken before anything else. She timed the batches by ear and by smell, the way her grandmother had taught her, before timers were the method she trusted. The chicken stew she started last and let go slow, the way it needed to go, the way patient food always needs more time than you think you can give it and always justifies the giving. Amara sat at the kitchen table doing homework and occasionally stirring things she was allowed to stir, which she did with the profound seriousness of a child who understood she was participating in something important. She asked twice what they were doing, and Vivian told her, "We are starting something." Amara accepted this and went back to her homework. She had her mother's quality of not requiring more explanation than was given when the person giving it was someone she trusted completely. Vivian loaded the car with the foil trays and the serving spoons, and the handwritten sign she had made on poster board the night before, Vivian's West African Kitchen, black marker, block letters. The he underlined twice, for no reason she could explain, except that it felt right, and drove to the flea market. She set up in 20 minutes, the table and the chafing rack, and the sign propped against the cooler, and she stood behind it in the November cold with her hands in her jacket pockets and waited for people to come. The first customer was a woman in her 60s who stopped because she could smell the hollow from 3 tables away. She bought 2 portions and a portion of kelewele and ate standing at the table and said, while she was eating, that it tasted like Lagos in 1987. Vivian said thank you. The woman bought 2 more portions to take home. By 5:30, she had sold out of everything. She counted the cash in the car before she drove home. After the $35 table fee, she had made $380. She sat with the money in her lap and looked at the windshield for a moment. Amara, in the passenger seat, said, "Did we do good, Mama?" Vivian said, "We did very good." She started the car and drove home. She went back the following Saturday and the Saturday after that. By the 5th Saturday, she had a small regular crowd. A woman who bought Joff rice every week without fail, and who brought a different friend each time. 2 men from the neighborhood who came specifically for the pepper soup and stayed to talk about it. A young couple who bought kelewele by the bag and once asked her if she catered private dinners, which she filed away without immediately answering. Word was doing what word does in communities that know food. She had made $1,400 profit over 5 Saturdays. She spent $400 of it on food handling permits and the food handler certification she needed for Bertha, who was not yet working for her but would be. She applied for a commercial kitchen rental at a community food business incubator in Clarkston, a program designed specifically for food entrepreneurs who could not afford their own licensed space, which charged $18 an hour and required a brief application and a production plan. She submitted her application on a Monday and was approved by Wednesday. She began cooking there on weekday evenings after Amara was settled at Delia's, and on Sunday mornings, while Amara was with Delia at church. The increased production volume allowed her to expand to 2 flea market locations. At the second location, a larger market in Stone Mountain that ran on Sundays and drew from a broader neighborhood base, she sold out in 90 minutes the first week and had to turn people away. She went back the next Sunday with twice the volume. She sold out in 2 hours. She adjusted again. This was the iterative logic of cooking. You read the response and you correct. Read the response and correct until the calibration is right. She started the Instagram account in month 4, a phone propped against a salt shaker, the food lit by the commercial kitchen's overhead fluorescence, and the afternoon light through the high windows. No filter because the food did not need one. No elaborate staging because the food was the staging. She posted every time she cooked and every time she sold, short captions that described the dish and its provenance without being pedantic about it. She posted the kelewele in its paper cone, with a line about her grandmother's recipe and got 300 interactions. She posted Amara at the flea market table, age 7, handing a foil tray to a customer with the solemnity of a child who has been given a real job. And the post was shared 40 times. She filed this away as information. Community was responding to the wholeness of the story, not just the food. The food was the center. The story was the context that told people why the food mattered. The Instagram account had 40 followers in week 1, 300 by the end of month 1, and 4,000 by the end of month 6. An audience built exclusively by the food and the honesty of the way she talked about it. No paid promotion, no influencer exchange, no algorithm games. People who had tasted the food came back online and brought other people. People who had not tasted it saw the images and asked where to find her. She posted her schedule each week, the locations, the hours, the menu, and tracked which posts drove which traffic and adjusted. She was a businesswoman. She had always been a businesswoman. The restaurant had obscured this because Marcus had treated the business dimension as his jurisdiction, and she had been inside the kitchen. The food truck gave her both dimensions simultaneously. She discovered she was good at both. 8 months in, she had $4,200 saved and a customer base that was real and growing, and hers entirely. She found the food truck on a listing site at month 9. It was a 2009 step van, recently decommissioned from a sandwich route, that needed a generator and new propane lines and a deep cleaning and a wrap and a commercial range installed. The asking price was $8,500. She called the seller on a Monday morning and asked every question on the list she had prepared the night before. She drove out to see it on a Wednesday. She made an offer on a Friday. She did not have $8,500. She had $4,200. She needed $4,300. She posted on the Instagram account on a Sunday evening. She explained, in 7 sentences, what she was trying to do and what she needed and what she promised in return. A free catering meal for any household that contributed $100 or more, which she had done the math on and could deliver without losing money, if her yield projections held. She posted at 7 p.m. By midnight, she had raised $3,100. By the following Thursday, she had $5,400. She bought the truck. She spent the next 6 weeks working on it with her cousin Delia's boyfriend Jerome, who was a handyman and who worked on the truck for free because Delia told him to and because he had eaten Vivian's jollof rice twice and had decided it was worth a donation. She did the cleaning herself. Jerome did the generator and the propane lines. She had the range installed by a certified technician. $600, the biggest single expense of the build. Non-negotiable, because a range that killed someone was not a range that built a business. She designed the wrap herself, using a free online tool, the same orange and green she had used on the flea market sign, and had it printed for $380. On a Tuesday morning in month 11, she drove the truck out of Jerome's driveway for the first time. Amara was in the passenger seat. Vivian had let her skip school for the morning because some mornings were worth skipping school for. She drove to the corner she had scouted, near the office park in Decatur, that had no food options within walking distance, and set up for the lunch rush. She sold out by 1:15 p.m. She came back the next day, and the day after that, 5 days a week. The locations rotating on a schedule she had mapped based on foot traffic and proximity to the commercial kitchen where she still did her prep. She added a second location on Fridays near a construction site where she had noticed on a reconnaissance drive at 11 a.m. On Thursday, 300 workers and no food truck within a half-mile radius. The construction site location became her highest volume single stop. By month 14, she hired her first employee, a woman named Bertha, who had been a short-order cook for 20 years and who Vivian had met at the community kitchen, and who came to work with an energy that matched the pace of a busy truck and never once complained about the heat. By month 16, she had 2 employees and a second truck she had purchased outright with the revenue from the first. By month 18, Amara had her own bedroom. They had moved out of Delia's apartment into a 2-bedroom rental in Decatur, with a kitchen that Vivian could actually cook in, with a window over the sink that looked out at a magnolia tree that bloomed white in April. On a Thursday evening in month 22, a producer from a local Atlanta television news program sent a message to the Instagram account, which by that point had 47,000 followers and a verified badge the platform had assigned without her requesting it. The message was professional, brief, and asked if Vivian would be willing to be featured on a segment about Atlanta's emerging food truck scene. She replied on Friday morning. She asked 3 questions: the format of the segment, the air date, and whether she would be able to review any quoted figures before broadcast. The producer answered all 3. She agreed to the segment. It filmed on a Tuesday. The crew arrived at the Decatur location at 11 and stayed through the lunch rush. They filmed the truck, the line, the food coming out of the window. They filmed Vivian at the range, from the back and the side, and then the front, and she cooked for the camera the same way she cooked for no camera, because she had never developed the habit of performing anything she was already doing. They filmed the line of customers, 40, then 50, then the line that ran to the corner of the parking lot. They filmed Amara doing homework at the folding table near the truck, briefly, with Amara's aware and composed participation. Because Amara had grown up at the truck and was not uncertain about her place in it, the producer asked Vivian one question on camera, at the end of the afternoon, standing at the truck's service window. What was the secret? Vivian thought about it for a moment and said, "I just cooked the food. I know how to cook. That's all I ever did." The producer nodded and the camera kept running, and Vivian handed a container of jollof rice to the next customer in line. The segment aired the following Thursday at 6:30 p.m. It ran 4 minutes and 40 seconds. It described the business in numbers: 2 trucks, 6 employees, $380 million in revenue in the most recent 12-month period, a catering contract signed the previous month with a corporate campus in Midtown. The anchor called it a story of resilience and community and the particular power of excellent food. The segment closed on Vivian at the window, the container of jollof rice, the line, the sign orange and green behind her, and the one line she had said to the camera. Marcus was sitting on his couch with his scotch when her face appeared on the screen. He had been watching the 6:30 news the way he always watched it, half attention, the glass at his knee, the sound at a volume that filled the room without demanding focus. It was on his second scotch. The apartment was a good apartment. He had moved after the divorce into a 2-bedroom in Buckhead, the kind of place that communicated a specific category of success, and had furnished it with the care of a man who understood that furnishings communicated things. Everything in the apartment was right. He was comfortable in it. He was also, in a way he did not fully acknowledge, but which expressed itself in the 2 scotches on a Thursday evening and the half attention to everything in the room including the television, bored. It had moved on, as the phrase went, to other arrangements. The arrangements had not yet produced the feeling that the phrase implied. It recognized her immediately. The chef's whites, the truck window, the orange and green of the sign. He set the scotch down. It watched the entire segment. He watched the numbers. He watched the line. He watched the anchor say $380,000. He watched the camera close on her face at the window. It watched the segment end and the anchor move on to the next story. And he sat on the couch in his right apartment, with his scotch going warm on the coffee table, and he thought about the 14 months of divorce proceedings and the attorney's fees he had paid, and the specific efficiency with which Brian's firm had dismantled everything she had built inside the marriage. It had gotten the restaurant. The restaurant had been closed within 8 months. He had not known how to run a restaurant. He had known how to take one. He called his attorney the next morning. His attorney's name was Brian, and the conversation lasted 11 minutes, most of which Marcus spent listening. Brian explained, in the patient way of a man who had explained similar things before, that the assets Vivian had built after the divorce were hers in their entirety. The divorce had been finalized. The settlement was complete. There was no instrument, no argument, no grounds, legal or otherwise, by which Marcus could reach into what she had built and claim any portion of it. The restaurant he had received in the proceedings had been closed within 8 months because he had not known how to run it. He had known how to acquire it. It had not known what to do with it once it stopped performing on its own, which it did quickly when the person who had made it perform was no longer in it. The restaurant was gone. The savings were spent. The 11 minutes ended. and Marcus hung up and sat in his good apartment in Buckhead, with the morning light coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the city visible below him. Still and indifferent, the way cities are indifferent to the specific calculations of the people inside them. He thought about Brian's firm's fees over the 14 months of the proceedings. He thought about the restaurant closed, the lease broken, the equipment auctioned. He thought about what $380,000 in annual revenue looked like from a two-bedroom apartment you were renting and a business you had let die. He did not think these things in the mode of self-pity, which was not a mode he permitted himself. He thought them in the mode of accounting, which was the only mode he had. The accounting came out the same no matter how he ran it. He had taken something she had built, and he had not known how to hold it. She had built something from nothing he had given her, and it was running, and it was hers, and it was going to keep running. He poured a glass of water. He drank it. He opened his laptop and looked at his current deals. He had 3 in various stages. He focused on the nearest one and worked through the morning and did not think about the segment again that day, or told himself he did not, which was not quite the same thing but was close enough to function. He called Vivian's number that afternoon. She did not answer. He called twice more over the following week, on a Tuesday and then on the Friday, both times from the same number, which she had recognized and declined both times. He called from a different number on the 3rd attempt, which she answered and then did not answer once she heard his voice. On the 4th attempt, he left a voicemail. He said her name. He said he had seen the segment. He sighed he had been thinking about everything, and that he felt the divorce proceedings had gone in a direction that was harder than necessary, and that he wanted to talk. He said, and these were the final words of the message, the ones that Vivian listened to 3 times, standing in the commercial kitchen with a tray of fresh Callaway balanced in both hands. The words that she had not expected from him, because she had not given him enough credit for a certain kind of self-awareness, even a belated and self-serving kind. I think we made a mistake. She listened to it the 3rd time. She stood very still in the kitchen with the tray in her hands. The kitchen smelled like frying plantain and palm oil, and the charcoal undertone of the pepper blend she had been toasting for the hollow. Berta was at the far range, singing something under her breath. The kitchen was full and warm, and it was hers, and everything in it was hers, and she had built every element of it from the knowledge in her hands, and the $300, and the Saturday at the flea market with the folding table and the handwritten sign. She deleted the voicemail. She put the Callaway in the oven. She set a timer for 12 minutes. There were things she could have said to him. She had thought about them. Not often, but sometimes, on specific nights when the doing of everything alone made itself loudest. The things she could have said were not cruel. She was not a cruel woman, and cruelty had never interested her as a mode. But they were precise, and they were true, and they would have landed. She knew how to make things land. She had decided, somewhere in month 8 or 9, that the most complete form of not giving him her energy was the literal version. She would not give him her energy. Not the angry version, not the triumphant version, not the explanatory version. None of it. The food was where her energy went. The food and Amara and the work. That was the complete list. Marcus had taken the restaurant. He had taken the savings and the years and the structure of the life she had built inside the marriage. He had left her with the knowledge in her hands because he had not known it was there to take, or had not thought it was worth taking, which was the same error in the end. The error of looking at something and deciding the picture was complete before you had actually looked at what was in it. He had looked at her and decided what she was, and what he had decided was small enough that he did not need to take the small thing. He had not taken the small thing. The small thing had turned out to be the only thing that mattered. She had understood this on a particular night in month 6, standing at the commercial kitchen range at 9:30 p.m. With Amara asleep at the kitchen table across the room, her head on her folded arms, her breathing audible in the quiet of the empty building, Vivian had looked at her daughter sleeping, and at the food on the range, and at her own hands, and she had thought, this is what was not taken. This right here. Not the restaurant, not the savings, not the years. This. The knowledge and the hands and the child sleeping across the room who had held her hand on the courthouse steps and waited to see what her mother's face was going to do. She had kept her face still. She had made the promise. She was keeping it. The catering contract with the Midtown corporate campus ran through the end of the following year and was renewed for 2 more. The 3rd truck came in month 28. driven by a hire she made from the culinary school she had graduated from 14 years earlier. A young woman in her first year out. 23. Who cooked with the specific instinctive confidence of someone who understood food, the way Vivian understood food, and who Vivian recognized the way you recognize a thing you have been yourself. She trained her for 4 months before giving her the keys to the third truck and told her on the first morning of solo operation, the food knows what it is. Trust that first. Everything else follows. The young woman nodded in the way of a person who has been told something she will not fully understand until she has stood in the kitchen at 9:30 at night with her hands on, arranged, and needed it to be true. Amara turned 9 in a house with a backyard. Not a rented backyard. Vivian had bought the house in month 31, a 3-bedroom Craftsman in East Atlanta that needed the kitchen updated, which she did herself over 3 weekends because the kitchen was the one room she knew exactly how to build. She had chosen the fixtures and the countertop and the range herself, a 6-burner commercial-grade range that was too large for a domestic kitchen and that she had chosen anyway because there was no such thing as too much range. She had tiled the backsplash in a pattern her grandmother had on the kitchen wall in Accra. Not the same tile, the same pattern, recreated from memory, and from a photograph on her phone that she had taken on her last visit before her grandmother died. Amara's bedroom was yellow, which was Amara's choice, and which Vivian executed precisely. The window in Amara's room looked out at the neighbor's dogwood, which bloomed in March, in a pink so specific it looked like it had been selected. On the afternoon the house purchase closed, Vivian drove home from the title office and parked in her own driveway and sat in the truck for a moment with the engine off. The late sun came through the windshield at the angle it came through in late afternoon in October, and the light was the color of palm oil, and she looked at it and felt not triumph, not vindication, but the simpler and more durable thing beneath both of those, the solid, ordinary weight of a life that was functioning on its own terms, built piece by piece, from knowledge that had always been hers and work that she had done correctly because she had not known how to do it any other way. She got out of the truck. She went inside. She started making dinner. She had $41 in a garbage bag and a recipe her grandmother had taught her, and that had always been enough. She just had not known it until the courthouse steps in November gave her no other choice but to find out. The knowledge was the capital. It had always been the capital. The rest was just a pot and a fire, and the willingness to light it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.